Hello everyone. So, unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of days, you probably heard that right-wing political pundit Charlie Kirk was shot and killed in Utah on September 10. Now, I think it goes without saying, but given the current climate of politics, it needs to be spelled out anyway, but political violence is wrong. There is no justification for what happened to Charlie Kirk, and if you've seen the up-close video, you know how brutal it was. I would not wish this on my worst enemy. In fact, his whole family was there, they've seen everything, and they're going to have to live with that pain and trauma for the rest of their lives. So, Charlie Kirk is dead. It's another scary escalation of the culture war, and I can't stress this enough, but political violence is horrible and needs to be condemned. That being said, there's obviously a lot of discourse online right now between a lot of people just mocking Charlie's death, and a lot of people not only insisting that Charlie Kirk's murder be condemned, but that people need to put aside the political differences they might have had with Charlie, and just see him for the human being that he was, as a husband and a father, as a man who only wanted to debate and have conversations in the free marketplace of ideas, and how he was ultimately killed for it. And this debate is ultimately what's going to establish the legacy of Charlie Kirk. And I don't really care for the notion that speaking of his politics right now is insensitive given the tragedy just happened. It's pretty safe to assume that his murder was very much politically motivated, so I think speaking of the politics matters a lot right now. And so, what is Charlie Kirk's legacy going to be about? Is it one of compassion? Is it one of tolerance and acceptance? Is it one of trying to make the world a better place by talking to people? Well, no. For anyone on the receiving end of Charlie Kirk's politics, be it the LGBT community, people of color, immigrants, women, the working class, Charlie Kirk was a complete piece of shit. His death is being used right now by the right to paint him as a sort of martyr, someone who died just because he wanted to discuss mere political disagreements. But that's not what his legacy should be remembered as. Charlie Kirk spent the entirety of his short career promoting hate, demonizing various groups of people, spreading conspiracy theories, and being openly racist and misogynistic. And also, he was a liar. So for this video, I want to remind ourselves of who he was and what he believed, and to point out that while his death was horrible, and you should feel sorry for his family, you should not feel bad if you don't feel much for him yourself. And to demonstrate this, let's start by discussing what Charlie Kirk thought of what happened to him when it happened to other people. For example, in fall of 2022, there was a far-right lunatic who invaded the home of Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi with the plan of taking her hostage, and he ended up beating her husband with a hammer before getting arrested. So this was a deliberate political attack on a member of the Democratic Party. And you know what Charlie Kirk had to say about that? Well, he smuggled and he chuckled and suggested that a patriot should bail out the attacker.
By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out. I bet his bail's like 30 or 40,000 bucks. Bail him out and then go ask him some questions.
So I guess the question now is, should Charlie killers ever be found, would he see someone bailing him out as an amazing patriot? Well, I guess we'll never know now. On the issue of gun violence, given that Charlie was killed with a gun and that his murder effectively completely overshadowed a school shooting that happened on the exact same day at more or less the exact same time, what did Charlie think of all the gun deaths in the US?
You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
Well, Charlie, seems like now you were the one who had to pay that price. Was it still worth it? And before anyone accuses me of lacking empathy for a human being who was murdered, let's hear what Charlie had to say on empathy.
So let's just a little very short clip. Bill Clinton in the 1990s, it was all about empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
So by following Charlie's own comments on empathy, gun deaths, and political violence, basically, we shouldn't care enough about what happened to him and his family to do anything about it. We should merely see his death as the unfortunate but worthwhile cost of having gun rights. And in fact, if you're an American, you should bail out his killer should he ever be caught, if you believe yourself to be a patriot. And those are just some of the stupid things that Charlie Kirk has said that you can apply to his own murder. But Charlie's been a commentator and activist for over a decade. When people speak of his murder in the sense of, he was killed merely for having disagreements, well, again, I don't want to imply that the murder was justified here, but until the killer is caught and we know the actual motive, I don't want to assume the killer's political leanings either, but I also think merely summarizing the issue as having disagreements is misleading. Charlie Kirk wasn't just a nice guy who believed in the power of debate and discussion and just wanted to make the world better. His ideas weren't mere points of disagreement. They were hateful. He advocated for rights being taken away from the LGBT community, from immigrants, from women. So, just a few examples of what he believed, off the top of my head. For one, he openly supported Israel in its genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza, which makes the manner of his death pretty ironic, considering the evidence that IDF snipers have killed Palestinian children by shooting them in the head, and even as that was happening, Charlie kept supporting Israel. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he spread hateful messaging towards the Asian community, he spread conspiracy theories about the virus, the vaccine, and the guidelines. So keep in mind that when people chose not to wear masks or take the vaccine and got sick or got other people sick, which resulted in permanent damage and death, Charlie Kirk had a hand in that. When rioters attacked the Capitol after Trump lost the election, Charlie was one of the loudest voices in spreading election fraud conspiracy theories. Every time people in the LGBT community have been attacked, or harassed, or had discrimination laws pushed on them, or have been accused of grooming kids, Charlie Kirk was a big part of that rhetoric. A few years ago, when he was asked by Kyle Kalinske if he would take just 1% of Jeff Bezos' money to permanently end homelessness for veterans, Charlie said no, that he would rather Bezos does it voluntarily than be coerced. When asked on Jubilee if he would force his 10-year-old daughter to give birth to a child conceived from rape, he said yes, he would. Charlie Kirk was also a racist. At multiple times he endorsed the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, which is straight up Nazi shit, just so we're clear. Another flamboyant example would be when Zoran Mamdani won the primary to become New York's mayor. Kirk made a comparison between Zoran and the terror attacks on 9/11. Charlie Kirk was also a shameless liar. After Elon Musk did the Nazi salute, twice, Charlie Kirk defended it, saying it wasn't a Nazi salute, but when he was challenged to do the exact same hand gesture, he would purposefully do it differently, trying to gaslight the entire crowd on what the salute was. Beneath the facade, Charlie Kirk was not a good person, and this is what we should remember. The rise of fascism in the US is very much something that Charlie Kirk contributed to, and he actively made the world worse because of it. Now again, that doesn't mean he deserved what happened to him, let alone that what happened to him is ever justified. I don't wish him dead. But I do wish that him and other people like him would stop pushing their bigotry and horrid views onto the rest of society. I wish that instead of him being dead, he would leave politics and focus on being a good husband and father and leave the world to progress instead of fighting for its regression. And now, I'm genuinely afraid for the future. Political violence is not going to end with his death. If anything, it's likely going to lead to something worse. But most importantly, this isn't the beginning of political violence at all. Politically motivated killings and mass shootings, predominantly done by far-right lunatics, are still common. And Charlie Kirk is unfortunately just the latest victim of this trend. Now granted, I'm not an American, I don't even live there, but I think it's fair to assume that the entire world is looking at what's happening in the US right now, and a well-known political activist just being shot in broad daylight is terrifying. So I'm not sure what to do about it. I think we'll just have to move on and hope for the best. But when it comes to Charlie Kirk, don't let his legacy be one of martyr. Remember him for the piece of shit that he was for all the people on the receiving end of his politics. And don't let his death distract away from the fact that Trump is still an authoritarian, that Israel is still committing genocide, and that the vast majority of political violence not only comes from the right, but is being done on a much larger scale now by the current administration. So, that's about it for today. Have a good one.